start to age your brain. So the philosophy was, I need to help get these extraordinary athletes who I already knew how to exercise and be fit, but I had to slim them down. And the fastest way to do that is that's good for the brain, is using the Mediterranean diet.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. It's a Monday afternoon. I think we're headed towards Labor Day weekend, which is hard to believe that it's going to be the end of summer, so to speak. But I hope all of you had a great weekend. Want to thank all of you who subscribed to our channel, Ronin Leadership Podcast. Right now we're hovering about 995 subscribers, so we're almost up there to 1,000. So that's awesome. So continue to hit the like button and the subscribe button, and tell your friends and family, and perhaps even your enemies about it, because they may need to know something about leadership too. And then certainly I appreciate the support for my books, The Art of Ronin Leadership, The Art of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies. Great books on leadership. And then my first foray into fiction, Full Circle. It's gotten a lot of great reviews from you. Thank you very much. And I'm writing the sequel now. So MikeHowardAuthor.com or Amazon.com. Enough of the shameless plugs. Let's get to the main part of this. So I'm really honored to have a friend of mine, Dr. Kristen Willeumier. We met each other through mutual friends of ours, through an organization called Alden, and through that become really good friends. And I've been Dr. Willeumier. We'll call it Kristen, though. I call it Kristen, but it's Dr. Willeumier, and she's a neurosurgeon. Neuroscientist. And she's written a book, and we'll talk about the book as well. And I remember taking a flight, and I read the book, I couldn't put it down. And this is not my usual kind of thing that I read, but just the what she does for a living. I'll let her describe it, and how she looks at the brain, damage to the brain, and maybe how you can restore that damage. That's a big part of her life. So, Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Mike, it is truly an honor and a pleasure being here with you today and to share knowledge with your community. And, I always appreciate our conversations because there's so many brilliant things that come from you and your life experience. I'm as fascinated about you as you are about me. And I, of course, love that you enjoy talking about the brain, because it is an organ that I am passionate about, but I'm excited because I actually think collectively people are more sort of intrigued by it, want to know how to take better care of their brain health and also prevent mental health issues.
Right, exactly. I'm taking some supplements because of the book I read.
I'm so proud of you. I know it's never too late. A lot of people used to poo-poo supplements. They didn't think they really made that much of a difference, but you talk to people, and as they get older, a lot of people will take glucosamine and chondroitin for their knees and joints. And I feel like everybody understands, as I get older, I need to protect my joints. Well, you have to do the same thing with your brain health, right?
Right.
So it's similar. So omega-3 fatty acids, curcumin, spirulina, good
That's it.
multi.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess to begin with, because you're literally the first neuroscientist we've ever had on the show, and you're the first one I've ever met in person. Why don't you walk the audience through your career? I mean, how did you get to be where you are? Is this something you always wanted to do, or how did your life path take you to where you are right now?
Thank you for that question. And no, when I was a young girl, I did not ever think that I would be a neuroscientist. I always say I sort of fell into this career backwards. I grew up in the Midwest, right outside a city of Chicago, a place called Barrington Hills, and it's sort of horse country. So a lot of people own and ride horses. So at the age of 7, I started riding and showing, and actually fell in love with the sport. And for about 10 years, I was riding and showing and competing around the United States and absolutely loved it. And as many people who get into athletics do, I was really interested in performance enhancement, meaning, when I go into the show ring, how do I excel, right? How do I get better? How do I grow? And so out of that natural curiosity, I sort of gravitated into the field of psychology, sports psychology. Now, this was back in the early 90s. So a lot of people, nobody was talking about sports psychology. It really wasn't this big field that you went into. So,
Right.
I did my undergraduate education at Boston College in
Hmm.
psychology. And then through the psychology department, I started exploring sports psychology and, how do, what is a sports psychologist? How do I get into this field? I joined an association called the American Association of Sports Psychologists. And I learned very quickly, in order to be in that field, most of the people were athletic trainers. And so they were coaching as well as working with the athletes. And have that, I didn't have that experience. I was
Hmm.
more the curious, intellectual, just wanting to understand, how do I get to work one-on-one with athletes? Myself being an athlete, but not having coached. So I decided to pivot a little bit and go more into the hard sciences. And really, I wanted to understand more about the brain. So sports psychology, and I said to myself, maybe I'm going to go to medical school, and thought
Hmm.
about sort of various career options, from neurosurgery to psychiatry. I ended up working in the operating room with a surgeon in between my undergrad and graduate school. And I fell in love with surgery and the OR. And I think I also just fell in love with learning.
Yeah.
And the doctor who was running that clinic at the time said he would help pay for me to go to medical school if I would come back and work in his practice after. And I thought, wow, that's a really sort of intriguing idea. But at that time, I was dating somebody who, at the time, was a team doctor for the New England Patriots.
Hmm.
And really smart guy, went to Harvard, very bright. And, they always say sometimes we meet people and our life takes a pivot. Um,
Yes.
so he actually got me to think about going more into the scientific discipline instead of traditional medical school, because he saw an aptitude that I had for science that I didn't even think I saw in myself. But I really looked
Interesting.
up to him, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna sort of follow this lead. And so instead of applying to medical school, I applied to do a master's degree in physiological science at UCLA. And the reason why is, when you do a master's degree, you can kind of get your feet wet into the basic science research, meaning, like, you dissect the brains of rats, mice,
Hmm.
fish,
Hmm.
right? And you can kind of study and explore questions that, well, you basically have to find a lab that you like who is studying questions about the brain or body. But I knew if I got the master's in physiological science, which is when you study all the organ systems of the body, if I knew I could take that, go to medical school, and I would have a little bit of a leg up, in maybe my first year courses, because I would have already had some in-depth experience. But that was the first time I got into a basic laboratory setting. And I started working with a species of fish called plainfin midshipman. And we were just asking the question about, this particular species of fish has two types of males. And
Okay.
I was looking at different regions of the brain and trying to understand why they had these different types. And I won't get into the details, because I could literally spend, in half an hour
Mhm.
talking about that project. But what was more important is I found that I loved being in the laboratory. I absolutely loved it. I gravitated towards it. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to go to medical school. I'm going to continue on doing my graduate work. And that's where I did a second master's degree and PhD in neurobiology, which is essentially studying the brain at the level of the single cell. So you look at individual brain cells and understand how they connect and communicate with one another. So I worked in a neurophysiology lab, and I started studying Parkinson's disease, or rather the
Okay.
young onset form of Parkinson's disease, and why neurons die in that disorder. And sort of concurrently, I was also, because I wanted to go to medical school, trying to, you know, I would go to these patient groups where they had Parkinson's patients, and I would sit in on their meetings and sort of try to understand what their life was like. So I was at that time still sort of merging like clinical experience or, working with patients with what I was doing in a laboratory setting. And ultimately, I took the jump from, I graduated, and then I did a fellowship over at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, continuing to study Parkinson's. And then I took the jump from the lab into the clinical setting. And I went to work for the Amen Clinics, which is a large outpatient psychiatric center, which uses brain imaging to, number one, sort of understand the neurobiology of different psychiatric
Mm.
disorders like autism, depression, ADD. So what does that look like in the brain? And what we would do there is patients would come in and we would use the brain imaging piece to help target and treat their symptoms effectively. So I ran the research department and, have published dozens of clinical trials with Dr. Amen. And that was sort of my ability to then kind of step more into that clinical space. So long story short, I went from being an athlete to sports psychology to physiological science to neurobiology to neurology to psychiatry. And, I've clearly fallen in love with the brain, and I see myself doing this for another 50 years.
Wow, that's quite the journey. It literally is because, like you said, opportunities present themselves. You never know what's going to happen, right?
Or what person will inspire you to take a completely different path? Because I will tell you, I just did not know I would have the aptitude to be the scientist that I am today. And that's the
Mhm.
beautiful thing. Sometimes people who are older and wiser than you see that in you
Right.
and encourage you to explore it. And because I did that, I fell in love with it. Because trust me, laboratory life is not for everyone. Some people don't want to spend 10 hours in a confocal microscope room in the dark with a bunch of neurons doing experiments. That's very much, being a scientist is definitely a career for an introvert,
Hmm.
because we are sort of very focused on singular questions. The brain is so complex, and to understand it, even at the cellular level, takes a lot of discipline. And you've got to want to be in that space, And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's definitely not for everyone, but for somebody who loves learning and questioning and understanding the brain, it's been my great joy.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool the way you said that. I'm, you call it the institute there, where you were able to
Oh,
take the image,
the Amen
right?
clinics, yeah, we were
Amen Clinic, yeah.
able to learn, because we did electrical imaging of the brain, which is called quantitative EEG. We do something called SPECT imaging, which is a nuclear imaging study that looks at blood flow and activity patterns in the brain. And what's
Hmm.
great about using these functional imaging studies is it helps us to correlate what's going on in the brain with your clinical symptoms. And then we can, because we created a database that now has over 200,000 scans, so you can use experience to know what supplement is going to work, what medication is going to work. And in the field of psychiatry, where a lot of medications have side effects, patients who struggle with psychiatric issues do not want to, be guessing or have their clinician say, we're going to try this medication first, let's try Adderall or Ritalin or Wellbutrin or Cymbalta. You want to have the most data possible to go, this is going to be the medication that you're probably going to have the most success with. And that's what
Right.
we were able to do, is help take the guesswork and then use the imaging, piece. Because a lot of times when you go into psychiatry, you never look at the organ you treat. You're really treating symptoms.
Okay.
Patients come in to see a psychiatrist and they're talking about the symptoms they're experiencing. But we were able to take it another step further and actually look at the organ and what's going on in that organ. And based on what we're seeing, what can we change, using medications and supplements or dietary and lifestyle modifications. And then we can have people come back and do a follow-up scan. And for many people, having that visual confirmation that what they're doing is effective, it improves compliance, it helps decrease stigma around mental health issues, because of course there's a lot of stigma, around saying you have depression or bipolar disorder. I think we're getting past that now. I think there's a greater acceptance of it, because once you get past the stigma, you can then treat it. And you just say, I've got to take care of my brain, and brain health can be as important as going to the gym every day and getting your workout in.
Absolutely. And you've also obviously morphed into this area of brain trauma, especially with athletes, I think. So how did that
Yes.
happen?
Yeah, I now have a love of studying neurotrauma in the brain. So back when I started at the Amen Clinics, which was in 2009, I walked into Daniel Amen's office and he said, "We are about to start a brain imaging study in former professional athletes, and I want you to be a part of it." And I said, "Great. I'm a former athlete. I love working with athletes. This sounds like fun." So we initially were going to start with 30 athletes, just looking at what are the effects of playing football on long-term brain function, right? Just basic assessments, neuropsych assessment, neurocognitive assessment, the QEEG, the SPECT, just to give us an understanding of what's going on in the brain. So we were planning to have 30 individuals, in this particular study. We started with 15. After the first 15, we saw, the damage was fairly significant when you were comparing these players to people who were healthy, that were their age and gender, that were healthy. And so we thought, okay, number one, we have to increase the number of people in this study. So 30 went to 100, went to me having a waiting list of 250 players waiting to get into the clinic. And it's expensive, right? To run these kind of studies is extraordinarily expensive. But what we learned was exposure to repetitive neurotrauma is not great for your brain health as you age. And number two is we decided to start a brain rehabilitation component of this study. And we wanted it to be very simple and accessible to the players. So we put them on a dietary and lifestyle protocol, which I helped, to tailor and implement with the players. We put them on a certain set of supplements. We tested the way their brain was wired and gave them specific brain training games and exercises that could strengthen the areas that they were weak in. We offered the opportunity for players to get what's called neurofeedback. So when we look at the electrical activity of the brain and can see areas that aren't functioning optimally, we offer the opportunity for them to come in and strengthen those areas, like strengthen the areas that weren't working well and calming down the areas that were working too hard. And we offered, medications for players who needed it. But again, it was a lot of it was dietary and lifestyle. And then we had the other tools, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation for people who had treatment-resistant depression. But we put the players on this protocol for 6 months and just said, hey, let's have you come back and do all of the assessments and see how you're doing. And truly, to my surprise, we saw measurable changes in brain function using the imaging, both electrical and functional. And when we see those functional changes, which means we were able to improve blood flow to areas of the brain that were very low in blood flow. And to put that in simpler terms, when you have low blood flow to the brain, you have low oxygen. When you have low oxygen to the neurons in your brain, if we don't make any changes, those are going to be the areas of the brain that start to die off first or atrophy. And as we age, there's just a certain percentage of brain atrophy that happens in your 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, it's just part of the aging process. So we were able to see actually quite rapidly, like I said, within a 6-month period of time, that we could improve perfusion to the brain or the blood flow, and that these changes could last over time. So we would have players come back and scan them a year later. 2 years later, 3 years later. And there were multiple interventions. It wasn't just, like I said, one thing, but to show we could make these changes and they were measurable and consistent over time, meaning the brain wasn't regressing as long as they stayed on the protocol. That
Okay.
was revolutionary. And not a lot of people have been able to show that. So it's one thing to go to your doctor and they say, well, you've got a low vitamin D level or low vitamin B level, or, we've got to change your hemoglobin A1C because, you've got too much sugar in your system that's bad for the brain. So there's all these things that you can measure using lab tests, but to actually be able to see the brain, the physical brain, make these recommended changes and see the changes last,
Yeah, that's
that,
amazing.
to me, it was extraordinary. And I'm a skeptic of everything. I was once a skeptic of supplements, like a lot of people probably
Sure.
are and may still be. But I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it was the imaging that has sort of forever changed my career and the way that I look at what is possible in terms of brain restoration and rehabilitation. And it's also why I think we've got extraordinary things ahead with the brain computer interface technology that's available. And you've got, Elon Musk doing his chip for the brain. You've got people with girls who have ALS. We're finding that you can use brain computer interfaces to help people move again. So I've also realized we're in this extraordinary time where I think we're going to see amazing things happen in terms of slowing down degenerative diseases in the brain, restoring the brain from neurotrauma, improving the quality of life of people who have issues, especially with the neurological disorders. So I'm excited.
Exciting. Yeah.
I'm
So you
excited.
mentioned the dietary and lifestyle part of it. Could you tell our audience just a little bit about that? Some of the protocols that you recommended to your patients.
Yes. Well, it's quite interesting because Dr. Amen had said to me again back in 2009, he's like, you're going to teach a brain-directed weight loss group for the NFL players. And the reason why you're going to do this is we already knew, because we published a study on it, the more weight that you have on your body, because fat creates inflammatory compounds, it can actually start to age your brain. So the philosophy was, I need to help get these extraordinary athletes who I already knew how to exercise and be fit, but I had to slim them down. And the fastest way to do that is using that's good for the brain is using the Mediterranean diet. So the
Okay.
Mediterranean diet has the scientific based evidence to show that it can reverse cardiovascular disease and neurological disease. So you were asking me, what are the steps? So number one, I put them on this dietary protocol, which I did it through for many of the players, and then subsequent, I was teaching in the clinic. So I've done this with more than football players, but the players make a
Right.
great example. Most football players were averaging calorically 3,500 to 4,000 calories per day. A lot of people
Wow.
tend to eat more calorically than their body really needs. And so the excess calories just get stored on the body as fat. And so, first thing you start to do is like, let's bring the men down to about a 2,000 calorie day, 2,000, 2,500 calories. So I sort of taught people how to do that or how to not eat so much in one sitting. So again, a lot of the athletes, I have them take their lunch. I said, split it in half and have smaller portions, right? Your body can metabolize 500 calories very quickly at a sitting so don't have more than that in one sitting. If you eat a burrito could be 2,000 calories. So number one, we get that under control. Number two, I taught people how to get their sugars under control. Excess sugar in the body is not great for the brain. So I had people in my weight loss group track the amount of sugar that they had per day for a week. And so I'm just going to ask you, how many grams, and you can throw out any number, you can say, I have no clue. But in an average day, how many grams of sugar do you think sort of the average person consumes?
50? I don't know.
It's a good guess. So the average sugar consumption is 100 grams. And people in my group
Wow.
are having anywhere between 75 to 100. So the actually healthy amount of sugar you have per day, for women, 25 grams. For men,
Wow.
35 grams.
Okay.
And that's from the American Heart Association. So we want the sugars from the fruits and the vegetables, the starchy vegetables, because that's the good clean sugar, but a majority of it is coming from soda. A lot of it's from the things we drink, the frappuccinos and the sodas. And so
Uh,
that's the easiest thing to cut out. So people ask me, where did I start with my group, besides sort of getting you in a better calorie range, maybe having a few smaller meals. You could still have a lot of meals during the day. I just want them a little bit smaller. And then maybe an hour and a half later, you could have the other 500, the other part of your lunch. Or I'll have you split your dinner. You'll have your first dinner, at 5:30 and your second one at 7. But we get the sugars down, and I eliminated sodas. So I said, let's just have you drink water. Let's get rid of everything. I don't care what, let's just clean the slate. And I want you to start with drinking half of your body's weight in ounces of water each day. So if you're 200 pounds, divide that by 2, that's 100. That's 100 ounces. So that's 2 1.5 liter bottles of water. So I'm like, just go to the grocery store and get 2 1.5 liter bottles of water. Those are what you're drinking today. And I'm like, if you want the upgrade, don't get them in the plastic. Go get one of those BPA-free bottles. They're usually 32 ounces. Fill 3 of those up and drink those throughout the day. So those are just some of the small, simple things. But Mike, and I know, you've been fit and healthy and you get it, but I just started teaching dozens of these small, tiny habits that I would change in people. The sugars, how much soda, or just let's drink water. Let's just drink water for a week and see how you feel and hydrate.
yeah.
Then I would start to change the number of servings of fruit you had per day, or the number of servings of vegetables. I might try to have you reduce a serving of meat each week. I understand people love meat, especially men, for protein, but sometimes it can be inflammatory. So I might want you to pair your meat with a vegetable, because vegetables are anti-inflammatory. So I would just teach little principles. Maybe it was coffee. You're drinking too
Mm-hmm.
much coffee in a day, because coffee is a vasoconstrictor. 1 cup is fine. So if you're going to have more than 1 cup, I might have you do a green juice, because coffee can sometimes leach the minerals from your bones as you get older. And if I have you do a green juice, that's going to help put minerals back into your system. So,
Amazing.
I mean, the book is filled with all these. And I have so many of them. I could probably sit off and rattle like 20 of them right now. But what I would do with people in my groups was every week I'd have them change one habit, and we do it collectively. And then it was
Yeah.
over the course of weeks and months, my players would lose 100 pounds. Then people in the clinic started doing it. People who never thought they could lose weight, women could lose 50 or 60 pounds. And I'm not taking them to the Equinox and sitting there and being like, give me another 50. It
Right.
was the revelation that, yes, getting up and moving and fitness is so important for your brain health. It's really important. But the key to weight loss and staying lean and healthy and getting lean for your brain is in the foods you eat.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you could see the direct correlation, right? When they started these protocols, and then you would obviously scan the brain and all that, and you could see the difference, right?
The leaner you are, you want your body mass index. So there's a body mass index calculator you can go to online, and you want it between 19 and 25. 19 and 24.9. That's actually a very lean person. So a lot of times, like I said, when I was working with pro athletes, not a single person, not in the first group of 100, their body mass index was not in the healthy range, because they're
Interesting.
athletes and they're larger. So there's actually a different calculation you can do with athletes that's waist to height ratio, and I can measure the circumference of their waist. So you might weigh more, but if I measure the circumference of your waist and it's too big, I know you got too much fat around the abdomen, so I'm going to slim you down. The athletes were great because they know what to do in the gym, but I had to retrain how they ate for their brain health. And it's very, like I said, Mediterranean based. And now there's something called the MIND diet that came out of Rush University. And the MIND diet was studied over the course of 14 years in individuals who were, I believe, age 59 all the way to 90. And they just tracked the dietary habits of these older people and then studied when they started to have mild cognitive impairment or dementia. And people who followed the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean diet along with the DASH diet, which is a low sodium diet. The combination of the two helped reduce, if they followed that dietary practice rigorously, sort of the way a pro athlete would or somebody like you would, they reduced the incidence of Alzheimer's by 53%. If they followed it moderately, they reduced the incidence of Alzheimer's by 35%. So that's extraordinary. This is why, you know, there's various diets out there, ketogenic diets, and hey, you know what? Ketogenic diet can be great if you have issues with epilepsy or seizure disorders. Sometimes people who have cancer, right? We want to reduce the sugars in the body, so you can follow the ketogenic plan. But for your long-term brain health, really the evidence shows it's the Mediterranean diet, or this Mediterranean MIND diet. And the two best foods for your brain health, unequivocally, green leafy vegetables and berries.
Berries, okay, yes.
So strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. Just in my refrigerator, my husband, who's in the other room, can attest to this. There's never a day you will open my refrigerator and you won't see strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. Every single day. So they preferably organic. And I'm gonna do one little pitch for organic. Back when I was studying Parkinson's disease over at UCLA, I dissect neurons out of a rat or mouse brain, and I have to keep them alive for like a month straight. And we would do these experiments, and I would test different pesticides in the neuronal cultures. Within hours, my neurons were exploding. Any kind of pesticide I would put in that little dish because it's highly toxic to neurons. And I think I had that little switch in my brain that was like, oh, pesticides and neurons are not a good combination. So when it comes to organic, especially with berries, I feel that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I highly recommend getting berries organic. And if they're expensive, then get the frozen berries. If you can't afford it, I still want you to get berries, you know, get the conventional. But again, if you're thinking about brain health, and maybe, you know, because you read the book, but my father ended up having Parkinson's disease. And so I always thought it was, maybe it's sort of divinely guided that I went into neuroscience, and Parkinson's was what I started studying back in the early 2000s, and then my father had it. You know, now I work with athletes that have it. I feel small habits practiced consistently over time is what keeps your brain healthy. So these little things that you're doing, it's like you right now, if you just drink your water quotient every day for the next 3 decades, that in itself is going to help support your long-term brain health. So sometimes I tell people, you know, you can go out and hear all of these things that you should do, but I've learned dehydration is sort of one of the number one things that is really deleterious to your long-term brain health. So just stay hydrated. Drink your water, have your green juices, have some green teas, eat hydrating fruits and vegetables. That's why I love watermelon. Any fruits, they're all hydrating. Keep this
limit the alcohol use.
Oh, yeah, alcohol. So here was our saying in the clinic. If you're brain healthy, like if you came in and we were just looking at your brain and you had a beautiful brain, we would say 1 to 2 glasses of alcohol per week is okay, but that is if you're brain healthy. If you're struggling with a psychiatric or neurological issue, you're not doing your brain any favors by
Sure.
adding in the alcohol, and it impacts your sleep as well. Getting restorative sleep is what helps support your memory. So
Right.
when we sleep at night, we take all the really cool stuff we learned during the day, like listening to your podcast, all the great things people are going to learn. You take
Right.
it from your prefrontal cortex and it goes into your temporal lobes and hippocampus and it gets consolidated at night. So, getting that restful sleep is really essential.
How many hours like do you average? Because you got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff in your brain. You must be thinking about stuff, getting ready for trials, and so
Oh, yeah.
do you try to shoot for a certain number of hours, or you just
For sleep,
yeah,
I have to thank my husband for this because, he knows I work a lot. I'm always reading. If I wasn't with him, I'd probably be up a lot later. But
right?
we start getting ready for bed around 8:30, 9 o'clock, dim the lights. We try to get in bed between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. And
Okay.
we're up when the sun comes up. So, 6:30, 7 o'clock. Um, but I wake up energized. And that's when working with patients or clients, that's one of the first things I ask. I say, when you get up in the morning, are you energized? Do you need coffee to
Mm,
get you going, or can you just wake up and have energy? And how are you feeling? Um, and that's a
interesting.
wonderful way for me to know, okay, now here are the habits I have to start changing, right? What is the first thing you drink when you wake up? Do you have water first, or do you have coffee? So when you sleep, you're in a dehydrated state. So that's 8 hours and your
Right.
body's detoxing. So the first thing you should do is have green juice, have a big glass of water, have water with lemon, water with lime, your spa water. Do something hydrating first and then have your cup of coffee if you need that for focus, or if you need that because it's a part of your routine. But
That,
one of the things I pride myself on is weaning people off coffee, trying to sort of minimize it, because one of the things we tell people when you're coming in to get your brain scan, no caffeine. So no sodas, no tea, no chocolate, nothing. Why? Because it constricts blood flow to the brain. So
okay.
if I want to keep your brain healthy, I want your blood vessels open. So I know people love their coffee, so a cup is fine, maybe two. Try not to have it, have your last cup by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that caffeine can last for 8 hours and actually interfere with your sleep. So I've worked with a lot of people with their sleep issues, and usually, again, like a strategist, I just listened to their day and I was like, here's the tweaks we have to do. Don't take your Adderall at 3 o'clock. Oh my God, I had a football player I worked with who couldn't sleep, and he would take his Adderall in the morning. So Adderall is a stimulant for people who have ADHD. He'd take it in the morning, he'd take it at 3, and then he'd have a couple Red Bulls at night. And he'd be like, I can't
Oh,
get to
jeez.
sleep.
I wonder
So
why.
yeah, sometimes we just have to go in and dissect. And I think I probably love doing that. Go in and
Yeah,
really
it's like being
helping.
a detective.
Totally. Well, I
Yeah.
wanted to be a forensic. So I should have said in my little, pitch up to becoming a neuroscientist at UCLA, I did consider becoming a forensic scientist. Um, and then I started to meet people in the field and I realized I really didn't fit in, but I still
Yeah,
love it. And you never know, I still got many decades of life. So I may,
that's true.
because I'm
True.
fascinated. I'm fascinated by crime. I'll tell you because, okay, this is a little pivot, but this will be fun.
Cool.
One of my summer jobs, I worked at a yacht club in Chicago. It was called Belmont Yacht Club. And I remember the first day I started working, a dead body floated up to the dock, face
Interesting.
first.
Yep.
I went running to it. I was fascinated. I was not afraid. I was like, whoa, what is this? How long has it been here? Like, it's decomposing, right? One arm is missing. So my brain always jumps into the fascination of it all.
Yeah,
And
I can see you doing that kind of work. in the
I,
future.
I feel like I could actually, there could be a layer of that somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, they have the body farm somewhere, and I'd always wanted to
Mhm.
go where they teach you about the decomposition of the bones, and then you can figure out when you work back with the crime and figure out when they,
It sounds like fun to me.
I know you would like
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would. I would definitely like it. Now, have you been military or police at all in your
Yes.
yeah,
So, and you know, from reading the book, my dad was a firefighter for 35
right,
years and a Marine. So I have a
right,
love of athletes, Marines, firefighters, police, and studying their brains and helping them. So, back at the clinic, we were working with firefighters who are exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals through the smoke. So the biggest thing, you know, if you were working with somebody in the fire service, is detoxification of their brain and
hmm,
detoxification of their system, and regulating their sleep and stress, because you know my father was on those crazy cycles, 24 hours, 48 hours. It
right,
impacts your sleep. So depending on what your profession is, or police, again, you're running towards danger, so we might work with you guys in helping your brain to manage stress. And people in your positions, just like my father, you compartmentalize it. So actually, it's there and it's in the brain. And when we image you, we can actually see the pattern. But you might say, I'm not stressed. But I put an
interesting.
EEG cap on your head and
Right.
see it very clearly. So what's great about it is we've got the tools and technologies and the supplements to help calm those areas down. So one of the passion projects of the many that I plan to do is work with the fire department, and going in and maybe doing some neurofeedback and helping them after they've come off of a call. Or
That
I
would
could
be
probably even
interesting.
do it with police. So you, for
Right.
example, if you've gone in, there's been a big shootout, or you've been exposed to a lot of dead bodies. I mean, you see a lot of death. You just see it, and you are stoic about it and can compartmentalize it and probably emotionally be quite fine. But sometimes we hold it in our brain and body and we don't realize it's there. So somebody like myself or somebody who studies the brain can come in and go, hey, let's do some neurofeedback. We can calm down these circuits. And when we calm down your brain, it will actually put it into homeostasis. It will help your whole body restore itself naturally. Because remember, the body and the brain are always going towards healing. Always.
Mm.
That's why we sleep. You know, we sleep for the restorative part. You know, I know CEOs and executives who say I'll sleep when I'm dead, but it's like sleep is actually a valued asset, and it's going to help support your mind and your ability to come up with creative solutions. And so, but if you're a person like police officer, firefighter, who's been exposed to more stress than the average individual walking down the street, because it's part of your,
Right.
it's an occupational hazard, then this is where I would want to come in and say, hey, let's, you know, every week I'll come in with my machine. We'll work with everybody and help just kind of put the brain in a more balanced state. And imagine how much better you'll feel. You'll get a better sleep. You'll make better decisions. You won't be the firefighter who gets into the truck and hits a vehicle accidentally because you're sleep deprived. Trust me, I hear it all.
I'm
I hear it
sure.
all. I know what a bad brain, I know what poor decisions happen in a brain that
Right.
is sleep deprived
Oh,
or stressed.
or stressed. In your career, you've worked with a lot of different people, worked for a lot of different
Yeah.
people. Is there,
Incredible, brilliant mentors.
that was my question. I mean, you obviously have probably like I have, multiple mentors in my life, my career. So what are some of the traits that you found in mentors that were really great mentors to you? What were some of were there commonalities with these folks?
Mhm. So I will share with you one of the beautiful things working at UCLA. So I had two mentors during my PhD program. One was the chair of neurology at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The other was in the Department of Neurobiology. He now is like overseeing the entire Brain Research Institute at UCLA. Both two totally different types of individuals. The one at UCLA, what what I love about going to graduate school is I get to sit with them. I would sit with my mentor, and he was so patient, and they literally taught me everything they know, how to write properly, how to think and problem solve. And honestly, it was the graciousness of spending time with me. I
Mhm,
lived in
mhm,
my labs and I
mhm.
was next to my mentors. I mean, I absorbed as much wisdom and knowledge. I mean, I had a Nobel Prize winner that was down the hall from me over at UCLA. I mean, I'm literally in the presence of greatness and
Wow.
brilliance. And I would go to these synapse journal clubs, and we had emeritus faculty that were 90 years old that would come and learn from us, young students, and we would learn from them. So the first trait is this exchange of information and the accessibility to their minds and how they think. That has really helped shaped me. And I'll tell you, at the Amen clinics, Daniel Amen, we would have sessions in his office, and they were brainstorming sessions, and the two of
Mhm.
us together were like lightning. Because he was a psychiatrist and I was the neuroscientist, and we had unique qualities that were very different. But when you put us together, the two became, the one became greater than the individuals, right? It's like,
Right.
and and so I think a great leader knows the importance of mentoring, knows the importance of what a young individual and a young mind can bring to the table. They're actually open to it,
Mhm.
because different generations come up. I mean, look at the generation that we're in now, these youngsters with the internet, and their minds work very differently than my generation.
Right.
So I learned from them. So I feel like a great leader is humble, accessible, um, and they're still accessible to this day. And I think that's important. A great leader sees your unique potential. So I told you, the person that was in my life literally pivoted my career from medicine into neuroscience because
Exactly.
they saw something in me I didn't see in myself. So a great leader, number one, might be able to see those things that that person doesn't see. And I think what's also great, when you flip it, you go, you're the mentee, right? And you're talking to your
Mhm.
mentor. A great mentee might also say, I have skills that I feel are being underutilized. So also for anybody listening, because hey, we all can still keep, stepping up that leadership platform, raise
Right.
your hand if you know you have a unique skill set in whatever field you're in right now that you feel is not being tapped into, right? So I feel like it goes both ways.
It does. It is. There's a symbiotic relationship between, a
Yeah.
mentor and a mentee. And I always used to say, 'cause I had a lot of mentees when I was at Microsoft,
Oh,
I
yeah.
love doing it. But I'd always say I learned as much from them as hopefully they learned from me. I got smarter
You
just
did.
learning about their book of business, because a lot of them were out of security. I would take anybody, and they can come
Right.
from the IT world or this world, and I find out more about okay, makes me smarter.
It
But yeah,
does.
it does, right?
It's
It's a great feeling.
it's a great feeling. I feel that anybody can be a leader. Like that's the other thing. I feel that everybody has the potential for it in them.
Mhm.
So, a great mentor helps you to be self-sufficient. I'll tell you, when I worked for the Amen clinics, I stepped in that door, and it wasn't a few months that I was there. Then Daniel Amen said, I want you to run my clinical neuroimaging department. And that wasn't my background. I had spent a decade over at Cedars and UCLA dissecting the brains of rats and mice and fish and guinea pigs and, doing basic science.
Right.
And he knew very quickly I could lead a team, I could run a department, I was self sufficient. So he gave me an opportunity to step up, and it was as if I had my own department. I had
Yeah.
20 kids, 25 kids. Many of them went off to medical school and graduate school. You know what? Some of them didn't do that at all. I had some people that came into my department that went to cosmetology school, believe it or not, because they wanted to work in research. But and it's funny, a great leader can take anybody and see a strength and go, this is where you belong. But you know what I'm also going to do? I'm going to help nurture you into a career that I think you're going to really thrive in. So I've helped people pivot as well into things that I think might even be better suited for them. Because a great leader is always efficient. So we're looking at efficiencies. I mean, in the clinical setting, I had to work very quickly. Dr. Amen wanted a paper a month. We had ROIs, we had meetings every day. We did Rockefeller habits. We had meetings at off times. I'd have like an 8:17 meeting and a 2:53. I don't know if you did that when you were in business, but if you have people meet not at 2:30, but at 2:53, everybody shows up. So, I've been around all of that strategy piece to help organizations become more efficient. But from my perspective as a leader, the greatest gift I can give somebody is to help them shine. And if they feel that I care and I can help them shine, they're going to work hard for me. And you know what I also do? I reward hard work. That weight loss group that I told you about that I taught,
Right.
it was 12 weeks, and there was a certain amount that you paid for 12 weeks. Sometimes for me, 12 weeks would be 24 or 36. I never charged them more. Because I kept saying, oh, we've got to learn, come back next week. And then I said to the person who loses the most weight, and I did it for a female and a male in each group, I said, you can come back to my classes indefinitely for as long as I teach them. So I taught them for 7 years. I had so many people lose 100 pounds. So being creative wherever you are, but incentivizing people even in small ways, whether it's acknowledging something with a little gift or quality time, I don't know, I feel like that's what great leaders do. You help lift somebody up, and then they'll support you in your work.
Yeah.
I'm sure you did that at Microsoft, but you had way more employees, right? I had a smaller, when you have 15, 20, 25, they're coming and going, but
Right.
It's also the trail. Like all my kids are doing all of these amazing things now.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. It's really selflessness, and it's not about you, it's about them, and they will do great work for you if you take care of them and lead them the right way, and I'm glad to hear that, because I think unfortunately, whether it's government or private industry, there's a lack of leadership, I think,
If
in
if
today's world.
people, I feel like people want to be seen and heard, and you have to look at the organization and say, if I'm going in and out, working at a company and nobody really recognizes my achievements and I'm just punching the clock for a paycheck, then you get what you put in, you get out of it. And I don't feel like that inspires people to work hard. They do
Right.
the minimum possible. And trust me, I've worked with young kids who are, I'd see them on the computer, or I'd have kids like kicking up their feet. And I would just say, have them come to my office and say, this might not be the right place for you. So I'm also really
Right.
good at moving people on in a
Sure.
really gracious way. So, I mean, sometimes great leaders have to do the hard work of firing a lot of people.
Yeah, comes with the territory.
Yeah, but we expect greatness, and then when we have greatness around us, great things happen. So I think you let people decide, do you want to be on the team that's going to elevate you? You might get your name on a paper. Guess what? And if you get your name on a paper, you might get into medical school, because you know how many thousands of kids are trying to get into medical school and they'll never have a name on the paper. So I made sure, like, you work hard, you will be rewarded, and if it's not the right place for you, I'm going to move you on with a smile.
Yeah,
Help you
that's
find,
awesome.
and maybe even help you find where you should be.
Right, help them find, where they can be successful in life. So I really want to promote your book too.
Oh, thank
So
you.
So it's called Biohack Your Brain, right?
Biohack Your
And
Brain.
and where can they find the book?
They can find it anywhere books are sold, Amazon,
Mhm.
HarperCollins, Barnes and Noble. Yeah, first of all, I'm proud of you for reading it because I know a book on brain health can seem a little, or a book on the brain in general can seem a little off-putting.
Yeah.
But I wrote this for everyone. I wanted to put the tools that we use in the clinical setting in your hand because really it's the everyday lifestyle choices that really provide the biggest dividends on your brain health and longevity. And then if you need to come into the clinic, that's when we can image your brain and take things to the next level. But I wrote it for people so they have the steps. And I also wrote it so people understand you are not stuck with the brain you have. We can make it better at any age. 80,
See,
90, we can
I
improve
love
your
that.
brain function.
Yeah,
Even
and
if
I
you
can
have,
attest
yeah, even if you have a neurological issue, because I've worked with dementia
you could
patients,
still make it better, right?
we can bring more
Yeah.
blood flow to the brain. We can improve
It-
connections in the brain.
yeah, and I can attest as someone who read it as a layperson that it doesn't read like a scientific journal. It is
No,
for everybody, and you can take practical. It's like a great business book or leadership book where you could take it and you can apply it right now, which is what I love about it.
practical application. And if anybody gets the book, here's the beauty of me. You can reach out on my website and ask me any questions. So if you get to the book and you read something and you want help, like I am accessible. That's the other thing about a great leader.
Accessible,
Being
yes.
accessible, I mean, we're all busy, but I honor the people who actually want to care for their brain health. I think it's really, it like touches my heart because nobody teaches us how to do this in school. There's no
Right,
brain health
exactly.
course in school. So I am
So I'm glad
here.
people. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like that's the gift that I want to give back, all of my education and knowledge, and it's expensive. It's expensive to go to the doctor. It's expensive to see a psychiatrist, a neurologist, and a lot of them aren't going to sit and give you this information. So if
Right.
I can be a cheerleader for your brain health or a cheerleader for you if you have a psychiatric or neurological symptom, as I say, no brain left behind. Like, let's
I
make
like
that,
that.
let's work that to your advantage, right? Let's work
Right.
the strengths of your brain. Even if you have ADD or bipolar issue, there's still strengths that you have with that wiring. That's what I help people tap into.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that. What's your website?
The website is drwilleumier.com,
Okay.
DR, and then Willeumier, WILLEUMIER.com.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure we have the link to the book, and we'll make sure we have a link to your website. So if people want to contact you after seeing this, and we probably bring you back on again because there's more to dissect.
I
Not,
would
no pun intended.
I know. I'm like, now you're going into my forensic
Right. Yeah.
forensic science. No, this has truly been such a delight. I mean, you are such a beautiful soul. I cherish our friendship and I really honor the work that you have done. I want to say thank you for your service to our great nation. And I'm really so grateful that I know you, and I really appreciate the honor of being able to come on your podcast and maybe inspire people to think a little bit more about their brain and get excited about brain health.
I think they will. I appreciate that, and we'll have you back on. Trust me, my friend.
Yay! You promise?
Yes, I promise.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it. We want to thank Dr. Kristen Willeumier for being on our podcast, and I think you've learned a lot. I mean, even though I read the book, I learned a few more things today just by talking to you. So that's awesome. We'll be able to post this podcast really soon. But all of you, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, continue to support us by clicking on the subscribe button and the like button, and tell your tell everybody about the podcast. We've got more great guests like Kristen coming up in the next few weeks, and so thanks a lot. That's it for this edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast.